Mark Gagan and you're listening to the Voice of Insurance podcast, produced in association with Advantage Go, enabling an enterprise view of exposure. Today's episode is a real treat. With all Voice of Insurance podcasts, the aim is to be able to get to a level of comfort and ease with a guest, so that what we end up hearing is as close you can get to listening in on a lively conversation between two good insurance market friends in a bar. Well, this week, I think we managed it. And that's down to my guest, Nick Line, the Chief Underwriting Officer of Markel International. Nick has had a fascinating career, almost all of it at Markel, and one of the forerunner companies that it acquired to make its entry into the London market in the late 1990s. Nick has been through markets hard and soft, as well as reserving cycles plump with redundancy, followed by equal and opposite inverse periods of insufficiency and strengthening. You could say that he has seen most things, and he's also seen those phenomena through different lenses, as he started his career as an actuary and only more recently took a more public-facing role. Nick's story is effectively Markel International's story too, as well as that of the evolving London and wider international insurance markets over the last 30 years. As the market has become more technically sophisticated and reserving, pricing, capital and risk have to be measured and controlled, it has become perfectly logical that a CUO might not necessarily be someone who has written a risk in anger themselves. We cover quite a bit of history, but it's the forward-looking parts of this podcast that are the most rewarding, because Nick combines all the technical smarts one would expect from an actuary with the communication skills of the best CEOs. His is a vision of the tech and data-empowered underwriter and global insurance market of the future, but one where the magic always still happens at the behest of a human insurance professional. Markel International has grown quickly in the hard market of the last few years, and this podcast is a record of a business that has found a groove and is firing on all cylinders. We made this recording in Markel's London office, only aided by coffee, tea and water, with no beer or wine anywhere to be seen. But by the end, it's almost as if the champagne were flowing, as tongues and jaws were loosened and expansive ideas were unleashed on the world. This makes for a fun listen that is brimming with smart observations and interesting takes from Nick. I hope you enjoy this one as much as I did. Enjoy the podcast.
Nick, welcome to the Voice of Insurance.
Thank you, Mark. It's nice to be here.
For anyone who doesn't know you, why don't you introduce yourself? It might be quite easy because I think you've been at Markel for a very long time, but then that might develop into being a history of Markel International itself. Let's hear about your career today.
Well, absolutely. So I joined Markel, or I joined a company called Terra Nova, which quite a few people have heard about.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know. I used to broker business in there.
Everyone I mentioned Terra Nova to says they used to break business. I can come back to you on that later and what happened to the results. But I joined Terra Nova in 1997. I was a part qualified actuary. I'd spent a few years in an actuarial consultancy, nice, comfortable job out in the West End. But the London market was calling. Quite a few actuarial students at the time were studying the general insurance exam, and like the London market and Lloyd's was very appealing. So I came over to join Terra Nova. And for a few years, kept my head down, did my exams, learned about the industry and reserving and the actuarial stuff.
And you were sort of in the finance department in the back where you weren't frontline?
Actuarial team. It was the actuarial team, and the actuarial team was being built up. Terra Nova then had grown. It had moved to Bermuda, listed in New York, and bought this managing agency called Octavian, which a lot of people remember.
Yes, no, absolutely. I certainly do.
8 or 9 syndicates as well. And that all went fairly calmly. And I qualified in 99, became head of reserving, which all sounds very grand, but kind of sensible. And then March 2000, something very special happened to me and the organisation, which was that Markel turned up and they bought Terra Nova March 24th, I remember, 2000. And Tony Markel actually turned up. He was in the building. He walked around the building making these little stump speeches. And it sounds like the beginning of a film if I was to make it, because actually the next few years were, I would say, slightly chaotic.
Well, I suppose events did occur.
Yes.
With hindsight, it wasn't the best time to bought the Lloyd's business.
It was a great time for them. I think history, we can roll forward to now, but early on, the best advice I was given at the time was, Nick, it's going to be quite turbulent. There's a lot going on. We don't know much about these people from Markel. Going through an acquisition could be quite interesting for you, could be quite good for your career. You might learn a lot, stick around. And 25 years later, I'm still living off that fantastic advice. And Tony and Steve and others would come over every quarter, would go through the reserves. Because the business had grown quite heavily in the late 90s, there were some reserving challenges. So every quarter, I tended to find myself reporting some reserve deterioration. And it was really hard work, actually. I found myself, having been in the back office back in actuarial, all of a sudden thrust to the front. We were putting all of our numbers onto this strange new basis called US GAAP, which I had to explain to people. People were up in arms because we were adding expenses into their numbers, which they thought was supposed to be covered by investment income. The reserves kept moving out. And I think it took, I would say, 4 years, which is only 16 quarterly reserve meetings, explaining what was going on. And they were massively formative years for me. Most of the actuarial team left. I had to be super organized, had to understand our data quickly, understand what we'd written in the late 90s in particular. So I had to get slips out, go and see claims people, go and see the underwriters if they were still here and say, what on earth did we write and where's it going? And all I would say is that there were some very heated meetings at that time with Tony and Steve Markel sat in front of me, which was quite intimidating, but they were always extraordinarily polite to me. I was the messenger with some really bad messages, but I would always remember they were very polite to me. No one ever yelled at me. They yelled at each other and other people and underwriters, but I was treated with incredible respect. I guess the other thing I learned there was presenting, was working hard, being prepared, being honest. And if I didn't know something or didn't know where a number was going to go, I would say so. And they really respected that. So that was kind of the storming, forming years of the acquisition. And then things settled down and we started to grow. And having been a Lloyd's London market business, we started buying things and opening up. We put a guy into Madrid and started growing in Spain. We were one of the first people to go into the Lloyd's platform in Singapore, which I think was 2008. We bought a cover holder in Canada. We bought a small business in Germany and then Holland. And then the Singaporean thing grew to Hong Kong and Mumbai, Dubai, and so on, and it kept going. And that was quite exciting times. And then personally, I had to grow the team. So we had to build a reserving team again, build a pricing team. This is a bit of a history of the market, isn't it? So we had Katrina, Rita, Wilma in 2005. That smashed up all the cat models. So it's like, Nick, can you run the cat team and kind of take control of that? And then, of course, Solvency II started coming over the horizon, and we had to build a capital modelling team from scratch as well. So in parallel to all this growth going on around the business, we were growing the actuarial team, and I was learning a lot about the market and what was going on. And you kind of fast forward a bit through all of that. We got to 2017, and our CEO came to see me one day and said, Nick, our friend and colleague, the CUO, is going to retire at the end of the year. How about you apply for his role? And the polite version of what I said was, you must be joking. I'm not an underwriter. I've never underwritten. Don't be ridiculous. And he said, well, Nick, you've been here a long time. You really get the culture. You understand the underwriters and underwriting. They respect you, which was a surprise to me. After all the discussions,
you never know, because there's always a potential for conflict, isn't there?
But we'd had sort of respectful conversations about loss ratios and reserves. He said, the guys in the US know and respect you. And let's face it, Nick, the next 5, 10 years and beyond, underwriting is going to become more data-led, and who better to lead us through that than Chief Actuary?
And I suppose being a CUO, a Chief Underwriting Officer, is different from being an underwriter day to day, because that is not business that's being brokered to you. No. You're not underwriting, you're looking after a team of underwriters, which is a very different thing. Yeah,
the sell I have to my underwriters is the best thing about me being the CEO is I'm not going to try and interfere with what you're doing, because I'm not going to kind of poke around, but I can promote data and underwriting and risk-taking and everything else. I understand the numbers, and it works really well. And all those things that I was told all those years ago have come to fruition. And what I would say is to be given that opportunity to change direction mid-career, I was in my mid-40s, I think it's fantastic. And I never thought I knew everything by any means, but I've just learned so much doing this job. And the actuarial world is very friendly, very collaborative, and you meet a lot of lovely people. And people say insurance is full of lovely people. Well, I've met more of them. I've been so lucky to get out and meet brokers, other CUOs, customers, clients going around the world. And it's been a great change for me. And I guess a couple of other historical moments that people will remember is I took over in this role beginning of 2018. So that was after him. There was a lot going on, pretty depths of the soft market. January, February, March, worked out what we needed to do. And then in May 2018, a chap called John Hancock stood up in the old library to give what was normally a fairly mundane Lloyd's market messages speech. But it wasn't the normal mundane speech. It was all about the performance gap, and he introduced Decile 10. And for the sort of second time in my life, all hell broke loose again. And it was interesting, as you know, and I think what he did was absolutely necessary. It was absolutely vital. We backed him 100%. It made my job of remediating certain classes much easier. We couldn't have done it laterally. It made it much harder because we had to write lots of different plans for the same class multiple times. And it was a tough time. I think you'd know that too, but the impact of that time on people was terrible. The uncertainty people had about their syndicate, their class of business, even cover holders around the world didn't know where they were. It was
a lot of very unhappy
tough.
people, also unhappy people all the way down the chain saying, people in America saying to me, hey, Mark, what's happening in London? Why don't they want this business anymore?
Yeah, exactly. And if you're a cover holder in Australia, you didn't know if your syndicate was going to get a business plan approved. And we'd taken business plan approval for granted for so long. And literally, I remember where I was when I got the phone call to say the business plan had been approved, which I wouldn't have thought that before. So that was quite tough. But we did other remediation. And the way I said it, and I still say it now, is that Lloyd's had to do 5 years worth of performance management in 5 months. And it was necessarily kind of chaotic and difficult. But we got things tidied up here. We started growing again with the remediated book in 2019. Things were pretty set fair at the end of 19, put our business plan together for 2020. It looked really good. And then, of course, 2 or 3 months into that didn't go so well either, because we had some COVID losses and we had some contingency exposure that meant we had to do some remediation, and we all went home, and the priority was people and their safety. But since then, things have been onwards and upwards.
Okay, TinTech London Market is back on the 4th of February. It's the event exploring how technology is driving change in the London market and enabling the business and operating models of the future. Attend TinTech London Market to discover practical insights to help you successfully deliver technology-led change. Hear how industry thought leaders are enabling client-centric business and operating models. Plus, how new technologies like artificial intelligence are driving innovation. Benchmark your approach with market leaders who are navigating the same challenges you face. Hear case studies from those at the cutting edge of technology innovation, and benchmark and discuss strategic solutions with your peers. Don't miss TinTech London Market. Search TinTech London Market to discover the full agenda and speaker lineup. See you there.
Well, you mentioned in dispatches that I was just doing when I was doing my research for these questions. 2023 annual report singled out in the CEO's letter for specific praise for spectacular. These are the words. These are not words I'm making up. Spectacular results, double-digit growth rates of profitability. So, is it going to be as easy to keep going? It feels like we're at this sort of high water mark.
Yeah, I think the market has been incredibly good for us, for all of us, and everyone's producing pretty good results. Obviously, recently, cats have had a bit of a say in the last quarter, but we have produced good results, spectacular results across all of our portfolios, all of our locations, and all of our classes. And that is partly to do with the following wind that we've had. Let's not pretend it, but it's also due to incredible amount of hard work by a lot of people across our portfolio, hiring people, growing business, launching new products. And it will get a bit more difficult as we go forward, but we've not spent these good years resting on our laurels. We've been building new offices, new locations, and a lot of capability that from a sort of actuarial point of view, I think is very important. So we've built an enormous number of pricing tools. We built our first pricing tool back in 2004. We've rebuilt them all again, new software, new platforms. We've built far more detailed reporting for our underwriters. And these aren't reports that they then ignore. We've built a culture where underwriters are super interested in their portfolios, the good bits, the bad bits. We almost make them talk about it every quarter. That, I think, will stand us in very good stead. And I think the growth will continue. We have to remember the market is still hard in that rates are still adequate. Classes where rates are falling, but rates are still adequate. And the new things that we've done in the last year or so, 2 years, I think will stand us in very good stead. There's a few tangible things I can mention that we've done. So a year ago, we opened in Australia, which is the first time we've put a new flag somewhere for quite a while. And we identified the opportunity and we said, well, back in 2005, we put one man in Spain and we get a second man in Spain. With Australia, we said, opportunity, let's hire 10, 12, 15 people. And given the geographical spread, we'll go to Sydney, we'll go to Melbourne, we'll go to Brisbane as well. And we've opened there a year ago, tremendous success, got some great people over there too. And that will help us grow. Quite recently, we launched International Casualty Division. Now, that's actually been worked on for almost 12 months, where we've been hiring people and getting people in. That's a whole new department, effectively. We haven't launched a new team here for quite a while. And we're doing GL, environmental and life science, and that will help us grow too. But every part of our ecosystem we've worked on the broker development team. We've worked on those relationships with brokers so they're very clear on our risk appetite, and the communication with them is extremely good. We've worked on a number of things that will help us grow and continue in the next few years. But there's a few things that we've done, all these things that are important. I summarize it really as capability and culture, because without the culture of high performance, people won't use their pricing tools and look at their data. The other couple of key things I think are important in the market is that I think our peers have been doing that as well. I'll call them peers, not competitors, because actually we're working together to some degree. And there's no point us doing all these fantastic things if other people aren't doing the same.
I suppose if they're just there to undercut you without much sophistication, it is always frustrating.
Yeah, so I think that's important. And of course, the other variable, which we've kind of alluded to already, is Lloyd's. The way Lloyd's oversees the market and behaves in the next few years is really important. I know you've met Rachel Turk recently, the new CUO at Lloyd's. I think she says a lot of extremely sensible things.
A phrase that's come straight back to me right now is, let's not talk ourselves into a soft market.
No, that's right. She's been round and spoken to people like me, and all my peers have said the same thing, which is, Rachel, please make sure 2017 doesn't happen again. And that was the year where Lloyd's really did hit rock bottom in terms of results. I think it was a £2 billion loss. And we don't want to repeat 2017 in terms of performance, but we don't want to repeat 2018 in terms of all that desperate remediation either. So there is some onus on them, but I think the people we deal with at Lloyd's now, Rachel in particular and Patrick as well, say very sensible things. They know what's happened before. And I really hope that between them and our peers and us, we can navigate the next phase of the market.
That culture thing that you just mentioned, it's interesting that you're saying is you're getting those underwriters interested in looking at those numbers and all the different metrics, presumably because you're in management, you can incentivize them to look at those and you can say, well, if that number's good, then that's good, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, we're a combined ratio driven business. And I think the profile of the underwriter has changed a bit as well over the years. But literally in our quarterly business reviews, the underwriters are asked questions, which means they have to look at this information. They have to understand, even in a class that's running well, which are the risks that aren't so good? Which are the risks that we would probably lose first if the market softens? Which are the bits that we want to grow? Which are the areas that we should be telling brokers to bring us more of? So I think that culture of performance, like I said, is really important. That feels very different to 5, 7, 10 years ago.
Before we move on, for any listener who doesn't know, what's the definition of Markel International? Is it everything that's not US?
We're everything that's not US and Bermuda. The purpose of Markel International is what it says on the tin, and we're here to grow the international footprint of Markel. When Tony and Steve came over and bought Terra Nova, that was the purpose. Obviously, it took a few years for things to settle down, but that's what we're doing. We're, like I said, we're in Canada, we're in Europe, we're in the UK provincially, and we're in Asia Pac. And we're very happy with those areas and the products that we're writing. They are what we're backing to help grow our portfolio. And as we grow, we want to put Markel on the map more than we are now. That doesn't mean planting more flags in more countries, but making sure that people know that we're there and that we're providing a full suite of products.
The other thing that's happened more recently, obviously, you were part of that insurance reset and Lloyd's resetting, and obviously many other global players resetting at the same time. Reinsurance took a bit longer to reset. It happened just over 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Did that affect the way you're running your business? So you've got reinsurance within the wider Markel group, which I'm sure you can't really comment on. But as an insurer, primarily, did that affect you?
To some degree, we don't buy a lot of reinsurance.
Because, I mean, you're part of a big group, you can run a much bigger net, and you're quite well diversified anyway.
Yeah, we've got a big diversified group, a big balance sheet, which we like to use.
And you're not really writing a lot of cat.
No, we're not writing a lot of property cat. So we like to eat our own cooking. So generally, we like to buy as little as possible. We like to protect the balance sheet, protect the big peak losses. So that did affect us a couple of years ago when there was a bit of a reset on our specialty portfolio. But after Russia-Ukraine happened, we were talking to our reinsurers straight away. We've got some very good long-term relationships. It's a big Markel belief, really, is long-term relationships with anybody. So we knew what was coming in terms of the exclusions and pricing and deductibles, and kind of saw it coming. So started to address pricing, risk appetite, and prices went up. We tried to push that through the front end as much as we could. But it wasn't a huge discontinuity that was a huge shock. And because we don't buy a huge amount, it wasn't too difficult for us.
So, yes, we have a very material conversation about whether Milton's affecting 1/1s.
Because we don't do property cat, not a great deal. I think with Helene and Milton, maybe whatever softening might have happened may not happen. I think it's what we read in the papers, kind of nuanced.
You're right. I think it's a sort of nibble around the edges.
Sort of BAU, not for the people concerned. And we were promised quite a heavy cat season with sea surface temperatures. They definitely caused very rapid strengthening of both of those systems. Obviously, if Milton had gone a bit further north, like it was going to do, towards Orlando, very different number. But I think it's just sort of kept people remembering that what the exposures are and where deductibles need to be.
I'm sure you're in the thick of all business planning for next year, or you've already done it, or whatever. Where were the numbers where you were most hopeful? Were you looking at good numbers and hoping they'll get even better next year?
Well, I think as I look across our portfolio, what is most noteworthy is just how well everything is doing. It's a bit of a boring answer to some degree, but
That's good, but if everything's good, that's
everything's
good.
Everything is fantastic, and it's a sign of the market we're in and the work that people have done. But if I was to call out some areas that have been particularly successful, I think our Asia Pac team are doing a fantastic job since we planted that flag in Singapore in 2008. It took a long time to grow that business to start with. We opened in Hong Kong and further into Mumbai, where we hope we'll have some friends soon, but we are Lloyd's India at the moment, Markel. But it took a long time to grow that. And what we found was happening was that our local underwriters were referring back to London a lot and not feeling fully empowered. And as you know, as a broker, if someone says to you, I'll get back to you later, it probably means they're going to phone someone. And I christened it the 4 o'clock problem, because basically they wait till 4 o'clock when London comes in and then phone someone. So we worked really hard to empower that team. And since we changed the leadership and invested in that team, they've just gone from strength to strength. And we have massively accelerated our Asia plans. Now it's Asia Pac with Australia. But I feel bad calling out Asia Pac when actually other people have done such an amazing job. Our Canadian team, which was a cover holder we bought in 2010, turned into a fully fledged division of Markel International now, done a great job in what can be quite a difficult market. Our European team have gone from a handful of people to, goodness knows how many people we have now across Europe, and that business has grown. And our UK team as well. We had a team in Leeds, which was a service company, which was hidden inside one of those little Octavian syndicates, like doing about £30 million. But it was an absolute diamond. And I remember actually we pulled the numbers out, which the syndicate didn't want us to do. We pulled the numbers out. They were amazing. We made them a separate division back in 2002, and they've done a brilliant job. And they are now a force to be reckoned with in the UK market. And recently, of course, with the way the market's moved, our wholesale operation, London and Asia, have done fantastically as well. So it's hard to pick out when the numbers are particularly good, because everything is firing on all cylinders, which I guess in this market it should, and with the investments that we've made.
Interesting, you were mentioning a direct UK-focused regional business. It's interesting that as being part of a global business that you've got obviously mostly wholesale, but some interesting direct businesses. They're still going to be brokered, but far more localized businesses. How do you think that balance is going to change? I mean, has that been a strategy you really like? Because not many other people have got that experience. They say, no, we're London, or we're London, Singapore, Dubai, Miami, and we know where we're playing. We're playing at the high end, bigger ticket stuff. But here you're getting right into the weeds with much smaller premium,
and that goes back to the vision that we had and our previous CEO had 10, 15 years ago, starting with this little office in Leeds, the SME business, hugely profitable. They're doing D&O professional. They then grew that to a care business, which is a huge piece of it now. The European business was similar and the Canadian business was similar. So we put those into a wrapper called national markets, because they're based in those countries, writing in those countries, generally SME, GL professional. What we liked about that business is its low volatility. And I think about it in two ways. One is the business is not very volatile and it's low limit stuff, 100% well spread. So law of large numbers, if I'm allowed to say that. But also the pricing cycle is not so volatile in that business as well. So the strategy was to grow that to balance out the more volatile, in both senses of the word, wholesale business. And we have done that successfully to some extent. The national markets is roughly a third of what we do. We were expecting that proportion to grow, but of course, the last couple of years, our wholesale business has done so well. That growth in Asia, that growth in London, with the way the environment has been, has sort of kept wholesale moving ahead of national markets as well. So that ratio has kind of stayed the same. It might change a bit as the market moves in the next few years, that national markets might catch up. But the key thing you ask about balance, there's actually another word there, which is blend. And what we're finding is that as these businesses have grown, we've got some fantastic products that we sell in London that we don't sell into these regions. And we also have products in the regions where we'll write smaller business, but don't have the appetite for larger business, that we don't write locally, but it doesn't come to London. So we now see quite a big opportunity to bring the best of our products from London into these regions. And I think that's going to be a source of growth in the future. So actually blending the two rather than thinking it's sort of binary is a new kind of strategy for us.
So it sounds like your strategy is also more organic anyway, that you don't say, well, I've got a particular idea of this being 60-40 is the ideal blend or the ideal mixture. Well, and I suppose they'll all fluctuate as those markets fluctuate.
Absolutely. And that kind of best of Markel project, I like it as CUO because I think one of the riskiest things you can do is launch a new product in a new country that you don't understand. That's sort of the one end of things. But launching more products that you understand in countries that you understand is at the low risk end of things. So looking forward to getting stuck in and actually using that blend that we have to keep growing our business.
While I've got you in the room, it would be crazy not to ask you. I know it's not your core day job, and we're mostly talking about US casualty here, but I thought, well, if we were imagining we were in the bar having a pint of beer after work, and I knew how brainy you were, I would ask you, Where are you standing on the great US casualty reserving debate?
Well, it's funny because being a trained actuary doesn't give me a crystal ball in any way. It doesn't make me an expert at all. As like you say, we don't have a lot of US casualty exposure here. We have a little bit of that social inflation type exposure through things like marine liability. Our cousins in the US are dealing with that themselves. I think it's very difficult. When we have looked at new countries in the past, we look for stable legal and regulatory environments to work in. And of course, they've had this kind of shock where there's been a big change in that environment. And they're now trying to catch up. And they're responding the way other people are, compressing limits, putting pricing up. Absent tort reform, if claims are going to keep going up 10, 15%, then pricing has to match. And it's not great to have to do that, but that has to follow. And the difficulty you have is that if you're expecting inflation to be 10 and it's 12 or 15, that's still quite a big miss.
Yes.
Actually.
When you compound things, it's painful.
Absolutely. Over 4 or 5 years or whatever the tail is, it's very difficult. So I don't have any magic answers.
It sounds like it's all politics. I had an interesting conversation down in Monte Carlo, and someone said, it was Charlie Goldie of MS Re, said, well, it only really happened when my local swimming pool shut. That was in the 1980s crisis. Suddenly, people realised that this is real, actually, because our local council couldn't get any liability insurance. The pool had to shut, and suddenly everyone said, oh, right, okay, maybe tort reform isn't such a bad idea.
Exactly.
Whereas before, they were all on the side of the plaintiffs before.
Yeah, it's a long feedback loop, unfortunately.
Yeah, it took an awful long amount of time, yes. Again, with your technical brain, something that's really interesting that I've been thinking about a lot recently is when we're having interesting or high-level discussions about the industry, where the industry is in terms of its handle on genuine understanding of risk in such a changing environment. I talked to people and they said, well, you know what? None of the models really understand, this isn't property cat. They said, well, they don't really get climate change. How can they prove to me that they're really incorporating a view of climate change into the model? Because I suppose one thing about models is obviously they're full of data, and data by definition is historical because it had to have happened in order to be recorded. Therefore, they're out of date.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on that? Do you think, or are you optimistic that we're going to be able to get there? Because I suppose some of these things, by definition, you are looking at the past and trying to project it into the future. But there are other ways of doing things, other methodologies of trying to get a better handle of where the future is going to be.
Yeah, I think the changing risk that we're exposed to from climate risk is important, and it's not just in property cat, it's in many, many areas. I can come back to that. But we've done some simple stuff looking at the cat models with all the buttons turned up to 1.5 degrees, 3 degree warming to understand what that does to our book. The issue you've got with the weather and hurricanes don't happen often enough for you to really get a sample from the distribution as to what's going on. And if you have a long gap between them, you then discover actually the world has warmed and the intensity gets worse, and the cats 4 and 5 happen with greater frequency. So like I said, we don't write a lot of property cat. We moved all of that to our friends at Nephila, who do have a much better handle on it. That's where all the eggheads are in terms of the cat modelling and the climate modelling. What things that hit us or concern us a little bit more are some of those, I call them perils, formerly known as secondary. So the convective storm, the wildfire, where we've been looking at aggregation modelling, better pricing of wildfire, both in the US and in Canada, where we've got some exposure. But I also think about the other impacts that the climate change have on our own portfolio. So political, social unrest, for example. So we know that in a warming climate, there is generally more social unrest. I mean, we've seen that in the UK even. Riots
do happen in the middle of the hottest day of summer, don't they?
Research has been done. You can see it all over the world. Temperature goes up, people are out on the streets. And there's more things to do with that. So it gets hotter, maybe crops fail, price of food goes up, more social unrest, more immigration, social unrest, and even unrest that's going to happen due to access to water and that kind of thing as well. So I think thinking about all these other aspects is important. And I also think, I'm not getting onto ESG particularly, but keeping it technical, companies that are seen to be polluting and not doing their best in that aspect are potentially more likely to be hacked, for example, by hacktivists, or be subject to protests and everything else.
Actually, I mean, they are being sued.
Yeah.
I mean, literally being sued for causing climate change, aren't they?
Yeah, well, you've got the
we'll see how far that goes.
Yeah, the D&O and sort of D&O exclusions and the liability exclusions. But I think, given what we write, exposure on the cyber book or even the terrorism book, companies being attacked or hassled in some way.
Because we see vicarious liability and, just standard general liability. If the ground's tinder dry and, of course, you're an electricity company, as we've seen in the US, it depends how their liability laws are structured, of course. And over there, it seems to be that it is always the power company's fault, that you can cause a wildfire. Whereas the fact, if it had all been wet 20 years ago, it might never have caused a wildfire if your pylon fell over. You just fell over and you put it back up again.
That's right. And I think keeping track of all these different ways that climate change can run through our book is really important for us.
away from the sort of negative side of climate change and being prepared for that, and prepared for that not hitting your loss ratio as bad as it might do, it's also our societal reaction to climate change, to combat climate change, is producing new classes of business. I had carbon credit insurers on the program. Really, really interesting. That's creating a new asset that now needs to be insured, needs a new insurance product around it. So it's really exciting times. I want to gauge your level of excitement about some of the prospects of some of these, particularly we're looking sort of for 2050 net zero. Some of them are being touted as the next cyber, for example. Cyber's still pretty good at being the next cyber already, but any of these classes getting you excited, thinking, oh, this could be really good?
Very excited. I think there's huge opportunities for us. I think, just going back to the doom and gloom bit, I think the insurance industry has always been here to help stuff happen. We allow the economy to work smoothly. We allow capital to be allocated. We help banks lend money so things can be done. And I think we have a huge part to play in helping the world build the infrastructure, whether it's physical or financial, that it needs to transition. So we already have a sizable book of renewable energy. So wind and solar being the obvious pieces. We invested in that quite heavily quite a few years ago, seeing the opportunity. But when we talk to the team, you start thinking what else we're doing. So beyond the wind and solar, we're doing battery storage as well. Grid scale battery, obviously vital to smooth out the supply and demand. Again, our friends at Nafila have got some interesting products which help people who own these kind of battery farms operate, which I won't go into because I don't know the details.
But some of those are interesting products, aren't they? That they're actually, you're getting into ensuring the efficacy of those operations.
Yes, and some of the highs and lows and some of the financial highs and lows you can get. So there's the battery, then there's the hydrogen as well, which is a big opportunity, and then even to the nuclear. And we've expanded our appetite on nuclear business, and you've got these small modular reactors, SMRs, which are like sort of flat pack nuclear reactors you can put where
it's slightly scary, the idea that you could just go and buy one in IKEA.
Yeah, put one at the end of the street. But the thing that's really knocked me sideways recently, and which you might have seen, is someone came to me the other day and said, oh, I'm going to go to a presentation on nuclear fusion. And I said, yeah, nuclear fusion, it's
I thought you need like a £500 million reactor somewhere in Oxford, and it makes enough to boil a cup of tea or something.
That's what you and I might think. And the joke is, fusion is 30 years away and always will be. And actually, people are coming to the market now, the commercial people who are running these things and getting up and running, and they're thinking, well, actually, we're going to need some insurance. So even something that I thought was way in the future, potentially coming a bit closer.
You've got exposure, haven't you?
Yeah.
If you can get atoms to go to whatever it is, million degrees, then you're not quite sure what would happen.
The risks are a bit different. I mean, you're not going to have release of nuclear material because the products are very safe, water or whatever it is. So it's still a big lump of machinery doing something. But yeah, that was quite surprising. So the message is, I think we have a huge part to play in that transition. And Rachel and Lloyd say similar things, is let's help ensure the transition. Let's help build the capability.
And I presume you're very much in favour of the innovation class and the transition class, and the sort of thing that you're likely to be using your full allocation of?
Yeah, I mean, we're using the innovation as much as we can, the ICX. We're still looking at how we can use the TCX as well, the transition class that they've created as well. But absolutely like to use that as much as we can.
It's nice to be given permission to go and do exciting new things, which I think we all agree are going to be the DNOs and the cybers of the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Talking about cyber, interesting, of the last 4 or 5 years particularly, it's been obvious that perhaps when I started really looking at it, when it started to really take off about 10 years ago, it was a sort of ecosystem. The underwriters would have, I've got my favorite breach response sort of people over here, and I've got my whatever, people who will come and rebuild your systems over there, and people who might try and recover your ransom over there, those sort of people. But over the last 4 or 5 years, the idea has been to bring all of that in-house. So this is a holistic, more of a service. Because actually we get a relationship with our customers to the point where they don't have a loss in the first place. We don't just talk to them once a year. We talk to them every week or every 5 minutes. Where do you stand on that? One, do you think that's been a positive development? Presumably that does cost more. And certainly I've had discussions with cyber specialists on that to say, the combined ratio can be made up any way you like. And sometimes you have to have a higher expense ratio in order to have a lower loss ratio. On this, they seem to say that was acceptable. Of course, when the numbers are good, they're good, and it doesn't really matter how you get there. Do you think that is something we can learn in other classes? Do you think it could be something to be applied?
I stand on this very enthusiastically. First thing I would say is that cyber was not the first class that's had all this sort of service. If you think if we'd been sitting here a few hundred years ago in a building with insurance, the insurance was the fire brigade would turn up and put the fire out. So we have a number of areas where we do that kind of service risk management type thing. It's not just should you have sprinkler systems or not, but our care book in the UK, we have a lot of consultants going into care homes, helping them manage their risk, which is very much welcomed. We have engineers on our energy and renewables book, again, providing advice on risk management and project management. I think it's quite exciting. I mean, cyber is obviously the poster child for that because you can look at your client in advance and sort of pre-underwrite them and understand their
Because
protection.
that
And
technology
everything else.
makes it so
It's so easy.
Yeah,
you can do a sort of pen test or a pre-pen test. You can then underwrite them. And the bit I love about that is you can say, well, here's the price, but actually if you change your system this way, a bit lower price. It used to sort of surprise me a little bit that we didn't do more of that, thinking about it from the actuarial point of view. We'd pour all this data into a price and give the price to the customer and not say, well, actually, if you change your business, you can get a different price. So the ability to actually help your customer manage their risk. And then, of course, cyber, you've got the post-event and everything else. But when you think about it, the life cycle of a policy doesn't start when somebody goes, oh, I need an insurance policy. The life cycle starts before that when they go, I have an asset. I need to protect it. I don't want to lose it. It's going to cost me too much to replace it. I've got money or I've got buildings or whatever. So no one likes to have a claim. It's a pain. You get some money back, but the money's not the same as what you had before, and it's a bit of a hassle. So to give advice to our customers that make it less likely to have a claim, that's great. And I'm all on for that. If actually you have a slightly higher expense ratio and a lower loss ratio, actually it doesn't matter how the combined is made up. And in fact, I think that's better for the world, because if someone has a claim, it probably because something blew up or blew away or got broken, and the world is worse off.
And if they've done all your risk management and you've done all your hygiene around them, and then they still have the loss, then you know you can pay it quicker because you don't have to discount all these potential bad actions that they may have done. You know that it's just been incredibly fortuitous and you should just pay quickly.
Absolutely. They've done everything. They said that the insurance policy becomes a backup, really. If everything that we said you needed to do, you did, great. This still happened, never mind. We'll pay. What's interesting to me, and you sort of alluded to it, is what other classes, where else can this be useful? And I guess first party, you can cover things with sensors. You know companies that are doing this, you start covering all platforms and drilling rigs with sensors, and when they start wobbling, you stop drilling rather than wait for the claim. How that relates to a law firm or an accountant, I don't yet know. I ask this to our teams all the time. I say, how are we going to get this kind of concept into other areas? And they probably are solutions, probably AI, probably solutions to that somehow. But I'm very interested in that idea of supporting customers and not just issuing an insurance policy, which feels like a bit of a blunt tool when you think about it in detail like that.
I want to talk about AI. Well, for example, with AI, yes, you could get AI to read every Enron annual report or every bit of communication from Enron throughout the 1990s and see if you can spot any red flags, knowing what you now know about what happened in year 2000, where it was exactly when it was no longer. Where do you think the best applications of AI are going to be generally?
Well, I think AI is going to be everywhere across the whole ecosystem from cradle to grave.
It's from where do you think the first ones are going to be, the lower hanging fruit, and where do you go? Where can we get wins now?
I think in the process of preparing a submission for the underwriter to make a decision. So where we're using a lot of AI now is our team here in our wholesaler doing a huge amount of work cleansing data to improve pricing. So we're filling in gaps in data, we're filling in gaps in ship location data, and we're even, I learned the other day, some of the old pricing tools we had where I thought the data had sort of died a death, they've kind of brought it back to life using AI. So data analysis and augmenting data from elsewhere is a big thing. We've used AI in what we call submission triage. So where as risks come in, prioritizing the risks that are more likely to bind and on risks that we like on sort of greener classes. And reading the engineering reports and summarizing submission is a key element. So in the actual moment the underwriter's got a risk, it's pulled together everything that they need. I still believe in the magic moment where underwriting happens. I think we're writing specialty commercial business. I say we write complex products over complex risks. And for those large or even medium-sized risks, we still need someone to look at all the information and to make a judgment. Once that magic moment has happened, yes, AI and automation can happen further down the line. But I think we're already in our business using Copilot. And people are finding a lot of shortcuts to even meeting notes and all that kind of stuff and summarizing things really helpful.
There's a lot of talk about workbenches and those sort of things. So be the ideal user of this, of course, because this is your job to see everything in some ways. Do you have designs on creating some single pane of glass where you can see everything that's going on, everything that's happening, and how that's then affecting everything else? How that affects your aggregates, how that affects your capital position, how that affects your reinsurance position, etc.
Our underwriters want a single pane of glass rather than using multiple systems. And that's what we're building for them, Happy Building, is allowing that experience for them to be really slick from beginning to the end. Building some sort of amazing tool that I can see everything, it's not really my style, to be honest. I mean, you might think I want to cover my screen with lots of data, but actually it's more to do with delegation, empowerment and trust to our team. So I don't think I need some sort of big giant dashboard. Where I want to see the AI being used is to make their lives easier and smoother so that we can actually provide a quick service to brokers write the best risks quickly and let the underwriter get onto the next
So you
risk.
don't want one of those levers where you can drop people who are sitting opposite you into the shark tank below.
Unfortunately not. No, I don't need that.
But I suppose, yes, you've got that aggregate job above all of them, but far better to make all their jobs much easier, and therefore an aggregate is going to be much easier for you.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
I suppose where they can see everything, they can see all the modelled output, they can see what this is going to do to the aggregate, they can see what it might do to my book in general, or my diversification, or whatever.
Yeah, one of my favourite phrases is decision-making should be where the information is. And if the information is at the front line, that's where decisions can be made. We're working and living in a very fast-moving world. And I hate referrals. I hate people thinking they've got to phone me and phone someone else and make a decision and go back down again. The Singapore 4 o'clock problem is an example of that. Underwriters come to us and they're amazed by how much empowerment we give them. Once they're fully trained and understand our risk appetite, we want them to go and make decisions. It's good for their morale. It probably means better decisions get made because they have all the information. I don't have any information, so I'm the last person to be making a decision. And the broker gets a better service as well. So I just love the idea of pushing out as much information as we can. We democratize knowledge. People can see their numbers and make decisions in the moment.
It'd be nice to have a tool, yes, but we could say, if you wrote this, it would theoretically make your book more profitable because this one's so good, it actually moves the dial on your whole portfolio.
Yes, and that's what I think we might get to at that local level. And some of that portfolio management tools that we're building people will let them do that. We say, well, if you did this, then this would be what your loss ratio would go to. Going back to the portfolio management topic, I had this amazing conversation with one of our underwriters a few months ago, and I think she'd been on a course about portfolio management. And we had this conversation. She said, yeah, Nick, I took one of the new dashboards that the team had produced. I asked them to add some new fields. I then took it away for a couple of hours, did some work, and I discovered I could add X million to my book without annoying any brokers by increasing these line sizes and reduce the loss ratio. I was like, wow, I've been waiting for someone to say that to me for about 20 years. And I was like, I want to bottle that and spread that across the whole organization. And that was like a real moment for me.
Yeah, get them to do a lunch and learn for everybody else.
Yeah.
It'd be well worth shelling out on extra expensive sandwiches to get them all in for that one.
Absolutely.
What about automation of underwriting? Another fascinating thing that's been happening here in London is what we've seen with automated follow and smart follow strategies and all sorts of things. And of course, when the market gets properly digitized and the friction gets completely removed, then all this stuff's going to be even more plausible, even easier to do.
Yeah.
We're getting there. And we know we're going to get there. We're just obviously probably frustrated about the speed at which we're getting there right now. How far do you think it can go? And also, you're still keen on the magic to happen somewhere on a pane of glass with a human being employed by Markel?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you think there could be someone else employed by Markel who has a portfolio underwriting strategy where they can have another pane of glass where things happen?
Lots of different things there. So you mentioned automation. I think the automation can happen pre and post the magic decision. I think on the smaller business, a bit like personal lines, it will go straight through. What the SME business that we write in national markets, parts of that are online. And again, it's answer 5 questions or 10 questions and tick some yeses and get a quote. But anything above a certain level, a human being will look at, an underwriter will look at. In terms of the lead follow, I've always found the lead follow concept very interesting because if you look through Lloyd's rules and regs, it doesn't mention lead follow. I looked at it back in when Blueprint 1 came out. I said, what does this all mean?
You don't want to define it.
It's what a biologist would probably call an emergent feature of the market. So in terms of that lead follow model, I think when that Blueprint 1 came out, it made me think quite deeply about expense and the structure of the market. And if you thought about it and rolled it all forward, you came to the conclusion that the market could end up with quite a few consortia, because a consortium is basically a leader and a lot of people following quickly who've all decided to back that person. But there's 2 features of the market issues that are in tension, and they will find a natural balance. So first of all, we need leaders. You can't have followers without leaders. When brokers come into the market, when clients come into the market, they're looking for solutions. The leader is where they go. They want a structure, they want a wording, they want terms and conditions, and they want the pricing. They want someone who's done the ags and the sanctions and everything else. So we need to have leaders in the market. The market doesn't work. That's the front end. The next thing is, well, if someone's led a risk off and they've done all this kind of extra work, what happens after that? Now, you could go straight into a sort of fast follow model. But then I hear people recounting these stories about how the first follower, the second follower found issues with the leader's work and the sort of second, third pair of eyes. And they don't like the idea of you going straight into a sort of follow after the leader. But at the same time, all that work the leader did, let's not do it again across the whole slip. That doesn't sound right. That's really what John Hancock was talking about when Blueprint 1 was launched. It's like, well, if we're all doing all this stuff multiple times, this dreadful word rekeying at every syndicate, that doesn't sound like good use of time either. And that 40% expense ratio that we all talked about, that wasn't going to come down unless we can somehow get some efficiency, both within syndicates, not all replicating each other's work, but also saving the broker visiting 10 or 15 different places to get the risk placed. So coming up the other way, you've got this idea of automated, fast, smart follow. And you can see there being a business model, and you could see that back with Blueprint 1, a follow-only model, where you're super thin, lean business, you're linking risk to capital efficiently, maybe different models. So maybe once a year in January, you decide who to follow, and you follow them for a year. Some people do that. Or you're deciding, maybe on a like key type thing, on a risk-by-risk basis, who you're going to follow based on some parameters. But you need to do it quite cheaply. And eventually you might have a model where leader fees come in, or differential pricing, or verticalization. So the leader gets paid for all that infrastructure they've built. If you've got a follow-only model, does that mean you've also got leader-only models? Probably not. The market won't let you lead everything. So if you're a leader and you want to lead most things, and I would say that at Markel, our first instinct is to lead. Markel Star says we want to be a leader in all our pursuits. If you want to be heavy on the leading, you probably have to do some following, whether you do automated follow and smart follow, just to sort of keep the volume up and to help the brokers out to some degree. I think leading 100% is quite difficult, but you can be predominantly leading. And you've got the capabilities, like I said, the pricing and the ags and everything else.
So with that auto follow, if it gets too big, do you worry about a kind of fat finger error type situation where, this 10 million line suddenly gets multiplied to 500 million and before you know it, it's all placed and it's too late for anyone to say, by the way, I think you got it wrong?
Yeah, sort of London whale type thing. I don't know. I think there is going to be a natural point where if you chew up the bottom of the slip with automation, it comes to a natural point. And I think Lloyd's has to think about how to regulate this.
The customer and the broker want that leader, and they want that alternative. They want that second opinion as well. They want an alternative leader as well. And if you don't give that alternate leader enough business, they can't be a leader. They can't be an alternative leader.
Yeah, people have to have enough practice being a leader effectively. So you need to sort of spread that business around those leaders. So then the market needs a critical mass of leaders. And how we do the fast follow, I think it's going to be really interesting. As a student of the market, a study of the market, I mean, obviously, you have the luxury of not being in it, as it were. But I think it's interesting just to understand and see how that will develop over the next few years as these different models mature. We've seen some of the names we've mentioned are maturing rapidly. And then we've got this market change coming as well. And how will they cope as rates change and everything else? So I think it's fascinating. Obviously, we're stuck in it and we'll experience it. But
I suppose the definition of as a leader is someone who has, even if it was they were writing something 100%, the definition of them is that they're someone who has convinced capital to follow them. The capital is following them. I think you're a better underwriter than the one next door. Therefore, you will be allowed to have a $50 million line and not a $5 million line. Because, the capital will be comfortable with you wielding that line. But if you gave it to the person next door, you said, well, sorry, capital would run away.
Yes.
And say, I don't follow you. I will not allow you to do that because I don't think you're very skillful.
The invisible hand should push the capital towards the leaders and then the followers who are good at picking leaders.
And having a good follow market, of course, is just another way for that capital to follow that leader and let the leader lead.
Yes.
There's no point being a leader if you've only got a 1% line.
No,
You can't lead actually because you haven't got the capital.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's where the capital will be attracted to. So I think, we'll see how it pans out.
You sound like you're, laissez-faire about where it would end up. Should find its own balance, that you don't have an idea of saying, well, if it goes more than 50, it shouldn't. It's say if the percentage of risk that was automatically followed.
I don't think I'm laissez-faire about it. I do understand the risks of it chewing up the slip too much. So you've got one leader and like you said, fat finger, something goes wrong and then it's all gone through a machine. I like that idea of having a couple of lines of defense, as it were, before that automation or that fast follow. So whether that cutoff's at 50, I guess it depends on the complexity of the class perhaps and the sizes of the risk. If you think that smaller risks probably go through all this stuff quite automatically anyway, but once the magic moment's happened, how many more people need to have that magic moment to really make sure that everything is done safely and sensibly?
You're running a team of underwriters, you're training a team of underwriters, you're encouraging and cajoling a team of underwriters and trying to incentivize them to do the things that you want them to do. What sort of skills are the underwriters of the future going to be having more of compared to the ones of the past?
That's a great question. We talk about that quite a lot. So you go back to when I joined the market, 97, and you wander around Lloyd's, a lot of underwriters were, to some degree, one-man bands. And I say man because they probably was a man, to be honest, which has changed as well, which is brilliant. And they did a lot of the stuff themselves, often extremely effectively. So if you think about the cradle to grave of a risk, the underwriter would do their own business development, normally in perhaps a more of an old-fashioned way than we do now.
When I was working in Madrid, some underwriters would come and visit me because I was part of their book.
They would do the business development. They would run events. It might be bacon sandwiches to watch the rugby, but they did an event. They had their own pricing, which is usually some papers in a ring binder, and they'd handwrite some stuff in. Usually the paper had Munich Re written on the top, and it had been photocopied 100 times. I remember seeing that. They do their pricing. They would do maybe their analysis. They would keep their ags on a bit of paper somewhere or in a system, as it turned out. they would do some analysis. They might even see which bit of their book was running well and badly and portfolio steer. Some would even set their own loss ratios. Didn't need actuaries. Set my loss ratios, they go into the syndicate accounts.
And most of them probably buy a lot of their own facultative reinsurance.
And buy reinsurance as well. Lots of FAC probably as well,
yes.
And lots of reinsurance. And those people would do their hiring as well. And normally in the same places they were doing the entertainment and the business development. That has all changed. So the analogy I like to think of is it's all been deconstructed. So you go to a posh West End restaurant, you buy an apple crumble for dessert, you'll get bit of stewed apple over here, you'll get a bit of crumble over there, you'll get a bit of cream, a bit of cinnamon and some ice cream if you're lucky as well, and it's all spread out. And that's how I think of the job now. We've got experts at branding, marketing, communications. We run proper professional events, not a bacon sandwich in sight. We've got pricing tools being coded up by Python experts coming out of school. We've got engineers and cyber experts and energy experts advising underwriters. We've got the magic moment we talked about. We've got some actuaries doing reserving, subclass analysis and helping people understand where their book is going. And of course, we've got people doing professional hiring, which is why, as an aside, I think the diversity of the market is improving because we're hiring better. And all those people are now experts in their field. Now, where's the underwriter come in? Are they just in the middle doing the magic moment? No, I think they're sitting over the whole thing. They are now still, in a way, one-person bands in that they know all this stuff, but they know enough to manage this group of people. They know enough to challenge, ask questions, and bring the whole thing together. And most importantly, their name is on the risk. Their name is on the results. And someone said to me the other day, well, Nick, that's because you want to know who to blame. I said, no, I want to know where to send the bonus check when it all works out.
Yes.
So absolutely crucial that underwriter is across the whole thing. And I think it's actually incredibly exciting learning all these different things. And we have launched, must be before COVID, so 5 years ago now, a career structure we called Underwriter of the Future, where we set out all the skills an underwriter needs to develop as they progress through their career. And it's not just pricing, it's understanding the financials, understanding US GAAP, dealing with the actuaries, all the hard and soft skills as well. And underwriters can use that to get the training they need to then move forward through their career. So it's a brilliant job. I think it involves so much breadth and knowledge, working with different people, still a people business, meet so many people in your day, travel as well. I think the opportunities are tremendous.
Nick, we've just come to the end of our allotted time, and luckily that coincides with me having run out of questions to ask you, although I think we could ask tons more. But I think, to be fair, we've had a really good run. Thank you so much. And also, if you're running a seminar on IFRS 17, please sign me up, because it does throw me. I mean, spending all that time on different GAAP forms of accounting, but IFRS 17, it's going to take me a while to get used to it.
Well, thankfully, I left the actuarial team just as that came in, so I've not had to worry about it myself either.
Well, yes, good. We'll have a whole actual series of podcasts on that at some point in the future. Who knows? But Nick, thank you so much for coming on the show. I've really enjoyed chatting to you.
It's been an absolute pleasure to chat. Thank you, Mark.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, don't forget to subscribe or leave a like or a review or recommendation on whatever podcast platform you used to access this programme. These really help get the word out. Before we go, just a quick reminder that advertising slots are available here and in other places in the Voice of Insurance podcasts. Podcasting is the fastest growing medium and attracts a high quality audience of key decision makers. It's also an intimate medium where you, the listener, are right in the room with me and the interview subjects. Needless to say, that means it's a great way of getting your message out directly to an audience because you know you've got their full attention. It's also very cost effective. So get in touch with Mark at thevoiceofinsurance.com to find out how you could be speaking directly to the industry. The Voice of Insurance is produced in association with Advantage Go. Release your underwriters to underwrite with Advantage Go's underwriting platform. Voice of Insurance is produced by me, Mark Gagan. Music was written by Anna Gagan and produced by Carlos Gagan. Check out more podcasts and written comment pieces at www.thevoiceofinsurance.com.